Hello, and welcome to another Old Scams in Shiny New Packages podcast. On these podcasts, we use 20th century experiences and ideas to better understand 21st century scams, risk, and potential approaches. My name is John P. Rayberger, and I'm here with my podcasting collaborator, Don Wood. Hello, Don.
Hello, John. Looking forward to another interesting conversation with you about this.
Today, I'd like to talk about this idea of phishing. And since we're going back to the 20th century to show how this ties to the past, I'd like to pretend it's 1985 and do a phone call role playing. So I will be the person calling you, and you will be the potential mark. Ready to do it?
I'll be 23 years old again. 1985. Okay, go for it.
As long as you have a credit card, we'll be good. So, bring, bring, bring.
Hello?
Hello, Mr. Don. My name is John. I'm with the Credit Card Assurance Corporation, and we've been contacted by banks to make sure that your credit card is safe. Do you have a credit card?
I do.
Okay, is it a MasterCard, a Visa, or American Express?
It's an Amex card, American Express.
Oh, good. Then we want to make sure your American Express card is not compromised due to recent scams. I also want to emphasize we need to do this quickly because these scams are going around quickly, and we want to make sure that you are not compromised. If you could pull out your credit card and read the numbers to me and the expiration date, that I can check it against our files to make sure that you are not being scammed. And this is urgent. I need you to do it right away because we're a little worried about it. We've been contacted by the banks. Could you please pull out your credit card?
Well, yeah, okay.
Okay, that is how a phishing scam sounded like in 1985. Phishing is just that concept updated to the 21st century. And it's typically done electronically. It's done via email and text primarily, but it includes the same major elements. For example, nowadays, in terms of people don't call you typically, what they do is redirect you to a fake website. Now, it looks like a legitimate website, but it's not. And for technical people, copying a website to make it look like a real one but act like a fake one is actually not that hard. Then the scammers send you a phishing message that says, hey, enter your account information in this fake website, or your social security number, or whatever information they're looking for. And there's typically urgency associated with it. They want you to turn off your brain, react reflexively, and enter the information because you're scared or frightened or alarmed or something like that. So there's almost always urgency associated with it. And then after you put your bank information into this fake website, it is automatically sent to your real bank, and then they try to withdraw funds using some kind of mechanism. That's essentially what phishing is. And because it takes so many times for these people to send out these messages to get a response, they're phishing for victims. That's why it was called phishing years ago. It is almost always done by people working on large computers sitting in offices. One misunderstanding about scammers is that they are somebody sitting in their parents' basement trying to scam you personally. Google has actually done a lot of research on what scammers do and how they live, and it's pretty much a 9-to-5 job for these guys. They go into office buildings, they work on computers, they integrate real and actual and publicly available data into their scamming techniques. They complain about their bosses. They tend to work on teams where everybody has a specialty. And so that's what most of phishing is. Does that make sense?
Well, it does. And we live in a kind of a different world now where almost everything one approaches with some trepidation. The pretend phone call that you made from 1985, I think I would have been somewhat suspicious even back then. But it's hard to go back to those days, John. Those were days when almost everything was done by phone or by mail. And mostly it was phoned by an 800 number. And when you called that 800 number, I don't think we really ever doubted we were talking to the person that we called. That was sort of a given, I
Right.
think. It's hard to go back to those days, but the amount of paranoia and skepticism and maybe even cynicism past 10 or 15 years has really gone up when it comes to dealing with people electronically.
Yeah, I think that's justified. The FBI has reported that most scams and the highest value scams are perpetrated on older people. And one theory is that older people are maybe a little more trusting
Mhm.
because they grew up in an environment where basically you could trust somebody over the phone. Now, going back to your comment, most of these scam calls would not be from a number that you would call. They'd be from a number that would call you. And remember, back then, too, caller ID was pretty unusual.
Yeah, we didn't have it.
Exactly. So it was harder to authenticate whether someone was actually calling from a legitimate number or just calling from, Peoria, Illinois, in a scammer's operation center somewhere. Now, there's a reason why phishing has also become more popular over the last few years. And one of the big reasons is that it's relatively hard now to hack into your computer or phone. It used to be a lot easier, but the systems and structures surrounding your phone have gotten progressively harder over time. And I'll give you an example. Suppose you are on a Google app on an iPhone on a Verizon network. Google has a very extensive team who monitor hacking activities all the time. They also set up various security structures to make it hard to hack the Google app or one of their Google properties because they would immediately lose market value if somebody did that easily. So the Google has a team working on it. Your Apple iPhone is now much more secure than earlier phones. For example, all of your data on your phone is what's called encrypted at rest. In other words, when it's being stored on your iPhone, it's encrypted. So a hacker not only has to get to your phone, they also have to somehow decrypt the data that's on your phone, and that's a non trivial challenge. So, phone makers, particularly the popular ones like Apple and Android, have made their phones fairly difficult to hack using a whole bunch of different techniques. And lastly, if you're on the Verizon network, they also have what's called a security operations center. So they basically have a group of people that are also looking for hackers and maldo-wells and people like that because they want to protect their network from people like that too because they don't want to have reputational loss. So if you're in a scenario that I was talking about, it's relatively hard for a hacker to hack your device. That's why they try to fool you into you giving them information via some kind of phishing exploit or something like that. Does that make sense?
Hmm. So if we went back to our 20th century analogy, you might have some really interesting information about yourself in a safe deposit box. And some bad actor might be able somehow to gain access to that, but they would have to get a key first, and they would have to get the bank to also have a key. So you go in there together, you open up your safe deposit box. The bad actor is excited because he's finally got that box open, but he finds that when he takes the contents out of that box, it's all written in a code, which he can't decipher. So is that the same then as your MacBook or your iPhone or your Android, that even if they could get in, they still have another barrier to cross, and that is it's encrypted at rest, as you
Yeah,
say.
Yes, that's a good analogy. That's similar. And encryption at rest is only one of the things that Apple does, or any popular operating system maker like Microsoft or Apple does, to make sure that your system is relatively safe when you're on your device.
when
Now,
it's in your device.
yeah,
Now,
when it's in your device, yes.
but it's going to leave your device and it has to go somewhere to do something for you. And that's a whole nother kettle of fish. But I think we talked about that in an earlier podcast, the
Yes,
transmission of the information. Okay.
yes.
So let me ask you, John, because you mentioned app. Is it your view that given a choice, one should use an app rather than a website?
Yes. If people run into this problem and have a suspicion that it might be a phishing attempt, there's a few things that people can do. First and foremost, they should slow down. They should always think that if someone's trying to push me to do something too quickly, I should be worried about it. The other thing is trust your gut. If you've used the website for a long time and this just feels a little off and you're not sure why, it just feels weird. The website feels weird. It kind of looks the same but feels weird. Trust your gut, because what your gut is a culmination of all your experiences with that website, and you develop a kind of intimate understanding associated with it, and your gut's telling you no, something's wrong. And the last thing is, when possible, use the app, because the app goes directly to the server of the institution on the other side. There's typically more security associated with it. Not always, but typically. The app also typically goes through the App Store or Google Play Store, so there's some review process associated with it. It's a little bit harder to hack an app than it is to create a fake website. So, yes, getting back to your original comment, definitely one of the things, the default should be if you have an app. Now, the problem is not everything has an app, but if there's an app and you're worried about something, go to the app and try to use that when possible.
Here's a question about apps. Is an app something that's only on the phone, or are there apps that you download to your computer, such as a MacBook or a Chromebook or something like that?
Well, it depends on what you mean by computer, because now there's basically a spectrum of them. For example, you can get a Chromebook that is based on the Android system, and that has apps on it, and it sure looks a whole lot like a laptop. You can also get a laptop that has a Microsoft operating system on it, and they've essentially relabeled their software as apps. So the term app used to be mean something specific. It's short for application, which is just a techie term for software on your device. But sort of everybody's jumped on the bandwagon. And so it used to mean something specifically. Now it means a whole bunch of different things.
But what I'm thinking, John, is that websites, when you go directly to the URL field and you put in the address, that's different from an app. The app, as far as I understand, you correct me if I'm wrong, you download that on your device, and that app has a presumption of quality and of security, because it couldn't work on your computer unless it had passed a certain number of specifications or has been verified in some way. Whereas a website, man, you're really not sure what that website is.
The big rule of thumb is that is true, but there are apps that can be maliciously added to people's device depending on the device. Some devices are more locked down than others in that regard. So the rule of thumb is to use the app, but you get into technical issues real fast.
And that's difficult for me to keep in my head. But you mentioned App Store, and I just presume that the apps in the App Store are pretty good and pretty solid, and I can trust them. Eventually,
Yes.
you have to begin to trust, or you can't function.
Right.
So you can trust the apps if you get it through an App Store.
Yes. Or if you get it through the Google Play Store. Yes. You have higher levels of trust in that. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So, anyway, the other problem with phishing is from a technical point of view, it's hard to electronically screen that out. A response might be, how come Verizon doesn't automatically use tools to filter out all the phishing messages? And or why doesn't Gmail just filter out all the phishing messages that are sent to you or your phone do it? And the problem is it's hard to tell whether something looks like a website is related to a web address or not. That is a very difficult technical challenge. Some are easy if it says, whatever Bank of America in the URL slash website address space, and then it has Bank of America logo and a familiar web page on it. That's easy. But it gets more confusing because like a big organization will sometimes use a variety of funny looking websites for support or things like that. And so technically, it's really difficult to figure out whether something that looks like a Bank of America actually is related to the web address that you see above there. That's why it's relatively difficult to screen out these phishing attempts. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is, and this is somebody mentioned this to me, and I think it is going to happen, is people getting phone calls that are phishing attempts, but they're AI generated. That is, it wouldn't surprise me if the AI technology got good enough soon so that you can get somebody calling you that's really just a bot. It's not a person, it's a
Mm-hmm.
bot, and
Mm-hmm.
it can understand your responses and it can try to do the same phishing attempt in an automated manner using AI, whereas in the old days, in 1980s, it actually had to be a person calling. Now, it may be a person in Nigeria or a person in God knows where, but it typically had to be a person. The concern is now in the future, it's going to be an AI bot that's going to be calling you,
Well,
which is that.
that is coming. There's just no doubt that's on its way. It's like a little snowball up at the top of Mount Everest, and it's coming down fast, and it's getting bigger and bigger. And
Right.
what I worry about is, and I'm not sure what one can do about it right now, is these bots that can imitate a voice that's familiar to you. And people have been talking about this. Oh my God, it's my son, and he's in trouble, and he needs money. I need
Yes.
to forward money to him. There
Right.
are ways to deal with that. You could have a password or a secret phrase or something like that, provided you remember what it is, which is somewhat difficult. We did that little play phone call from 1985, and I'm wondering if what we're talking about now, which is critical and important, will become obsolete in 5 years when we get to the point where these bots can imitate human beings and speak so perfectly like your loved one that you can't believe it, and you're just suckered into it.
Yeah, I think that's a concern, but I think the same concepts that we just talked about initially will still be valid. There will be urgency associated with it. They will want you to provide information. They will know something about you and things like that. And so, another piece of advice I've heard is they authenticate you, you need to authenticate them. And that is authentication is if you call someplace, they want to collect information about you to make sure it's really you. So making sure the person you're talking to is really that person is called authentication in the technical world. So let's say you called your bank. They are going to be looking at a whole bunch of things. They're going to be looking at the phone number you called from. They're going to be looking at the routing of that phone number through the system. They're also going to ask you questions like what's your mother's maiden name? What was the name of your first pet? What is the make of the first car you owned? What they're
Yes.
doing is authenticating you.
Yes.
Now, if you understand that concept, you need to think about authenticating them. That is, how do I know the website I'm going to, the person I'm talking to is really who they say they are? And that's kind of a higher order thing, more than trust your gut and don't be in a hurry. it makes you think. It's like, okay, can I really trust the person who I'm talking to? Can I really trust the website I'm on? So a higher order activity would be to figure out some kind of authentication process. Now, you talked about a secret I'm in trouble password. That's one authentication mechanism. So, hey, son, if you ever get in trouble, call me, and the password is the duck flies at dawn or something like that. And so, okay, son, I'm trying to call you. And so, what's our secret password? And AI is probably not going to know that the password is the duck flies at dawn, but that's how you authenticate them. Does that make sense?
It does, and I think it's good advice. These calls won't happen often. Hopefully, they never happen. You might decide, okay, the duck flies at dawn, and then 2 years later, that phone call comes in, someone's in trouble, and you think, oh my God, what the heck did we decide on? The eagle always gets its worm or something. The mind will just start going in crazy places. But what you mentioned, I think earlier was pretty good, which is companies are constantly asking you 3 or 4 or 5 security questions before you can do anything. So it seems to me that maybe the questions you would ask 3 or 4 or 5 questions about some really detailed information that is quite likely not on the internet or has never been revealed. And it's that kind of a cross-examination almost of the person's identity. Even if it's your son, you have to be a little bit hard about this and ask some pretty tough and maybe even personal questions that at this point, no computer or database would happen to know, or hopefully would not know.
Yes, that's exactly what authentication of somebody else is. It's you using a variety of techniques and tools to figure out that you're talking to the real person and not some bot somewhere. So, yes, I mean, you can ask, okay, what stupid name, son, did I call you when you were 5 years old and you had an accident? Probably a bot is not going to know that.
That's
They
right.
may they may guess at something, but the real answer would be boo boo head, and the bot's probably not going to guess boo boo head, but that little kid is probably going to remember boo boo head for the rest of his life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, might live in fear of Boo Boo Head, and it may have caused all kinds of personality problems for him. But darn it, we're going to use that to make sure it's you.
Right. And so, yeah, I agree with you in that basically we're talking about the same thing. It's you, they authenticate you, you authenticate them. That's the sort of high level stuff that people should do now and will need to do in the future. So,
The whole voice thing. If you call a company now, sometimes you might hear them say at ABC store, your voice is your password, and
right.
you're supposed to repeat that phrase at ABC store. My voice is my password, and then boom, open sesame, you're in. Again, that's just one of those things that now your voice is out there in the wild. It's recorded somewhere on a server, who knows where, and stuff like that could get out.
Yeah, it sure could. That's exactly right. And your voice is your password is one type of authentication mechanism. Typically, good companies move away from just one type of authentication mechanism and incorporate multiple ones. And they get really sophisticated. Like, they have to, for example, you can register your phone number with them. Now, it's possible to spoof a phone number, but it's pretty hard. They also can be sophisticated enough to know what time zone you're in. So it's highly unlikely that you're going to be calling them at 2 a.m., but it's much more likely you might be calling them at 3 p.m. your time. And so these companies can get pretty sophisticated about authenticating people because they also don't want to get in a lot of trouble by doing something for a real person and later find out it was a scam.
Yeah, I think, John, we live in an age of constant vigilance. I don't recall that as a younger person. And I do think that's kind of a psychological burden that we all have to carry. Nothing's free. We've got this great technology that provides us to do this Zoom call and to send a video around the world in a mere seconds. And that's great and fun. And it's wonderful to be alive during this time when we can do it. But nothing's free. And there is that kind of brooding omnipresence of vulnerability and threat that we have to keep in mind, all the time.
Yeah, that's true. The internet is a tool and it can be used for good and it can be used for evil. AI is a tool and it can be used for good and it can be used for evil. That's very true. I mean, we're in an interconnected world and it's going to stay interconnected. I mean, one of the future podcasts is going to be about why we can't go back to 1985, but there's
Yeah.
really good reasons why we're not going back to 1985.
Yes.
So the world has changed and we need to keep up with it. But the changed world also offers all kinds of benefits associated with it.
So I'm going to sum up this. This is good advice, and I really enjoyed this conversation. The first thing is to trust your instincts. We have these instincts, and as we get older, they're even better because we have experience. So trust your instincts. Slow down, which is another piece of advice that's good. A lot of times we're in a hurry. We just want to get it done. And then, if possible, use the app. And that's really good because it just seems to be that there's more and more apps out there to do stuff. And that gives you kind of it's not a perfect thing, but it's pretty much a sure thing.
Yes, it's typically much better, especially on a phone that's gone through the App Store, or Google Play Store, something like that. Gives you greater assurance.
And don't be shy or afraid of authenticating the person on the other end.
That's right.
They
Especially
grilled
if,
you, you can grill them.
exactly. And that's the attraction of being older too, is that you've had more experiences like this. And maybe you're a little bit more suspicious and you've lived enough life that, you've heard some things and seen some things. So you should feel empowered to do that. Finally, I will end this podcast by saying, don't be afraid because modern scams are just old scams in shiny new packages. Farewell.
Thanks, John. Talk to you later.